Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. We are on a little bit of a bind today because this is a very long poem, and my software only has 30 minutes of recording capability. So, subscribe. My other channels listed in the description below. Go over there. I am only 46 subscribers away from 1,000. This is part of National Poetry Month. 30 poetry discussions in 30 days. Yada yada yada. Let's get to it. We will start with the poetry reading The Witch, Two Witches. This is The Witch of Coos. I stayed the night for shelter at a farm behind the mountain with a mother and son, two old believers. They did all the talking. Mother, folks think I am a witch. Folks think a witch who has familiar spirits. She could call up to pass a winter evening, but won't. Should be burned at the stake or something. Summoning spirits isn't button who's got the button. I would have them know. Son, mother can make a common table rear and kick with two legs like an army mule. Mother, and I've done it. What good would I, and when I've done it, what good would I have done, rather than tip a table for you? Let me tell you what Raleigh, the Sioux control, once told me. He said the dead had souls, but when I asked him how could that be, I thought the dead were souls. He broke my trance. Don't that make you suspicious that there's something the dead are keeping back? Yes, there's something the dead are keeping back. Son, you wouldn't want to tell him what we have up attic, mother. Mother, bones. A skeleton. Son, but the headboard of mother's bed is pushed against the attic door. The door is nailed shut. It's harmless. Mother hears it at night, halting perplexed behind the barrier of door and headboard. Where it wants to get is back into the cellar where it came from. Mother, we'll never let them, will we, son? We'll never. Son, it left the cellar 40 years ago and carried itself like a pile of dishes, up one flight from the cellar to the kitchen, another from the kitchen to the bedroom, another from the bedroom to the attic, right past both father and mother, and neither stopped it. Father had gone upstairs, mother was downstairs, I was a baby, I don't know where I was. Mother, the only fault my husband found with me, I went to sleep before I went to bed, especially in winter when the bed might just as well be ice as the clothes snow. The night the bones came up the cellar stairs, Tofiel had gone to bed alone and left me, but left an open door to cool off the room, so as to sort of turn me out of it. I was just coming to myself enough to wonder where the cold was coming from when I, pardon me, I'm sorry. When I heard Tofiel upstairs in the bedroom and thought I heard him downstairs in the cellar. The board we had laid down to walk dry shod on when there was water in the cellar in spring struck the hard cellar bottom, and then someone began the stairs, 2 footsteps for each step, the way a man with one leg and a crutch or a child comes up. It wasn't Tofiel. It wasn't anyone who could be there. The bulkhead double doors were double locked and swollen tight and buried under snow. The cellar windows were banked up with sawdust and swollen tight and buried under snow. It was the bones. I knew them, and good reason. My first impulse was to get the knob and hold the door, but the bones didn't try the door. They halted helpless on the landing, waiting for things to happen in their favor. The faintest restless rustling ran all through them. I never could have done the thing I did if the wish hadn't been too strong in me to see how they were mounted for this walk. I had a vision of them put together, not like a man but like a chandelier, so suddenly I flung the door wide on him. The moment he stood balancing the emotion and all but lost himself, a tongue of fire flashed out and licked along his upper teeth. Smoke rolled inside the sockets of his eyes. Then he came at me with one hand outstretched, the way he did in life once. But this time I struck the hand off brittle on the floor and back from him on the floor myself. The finger piece slid in all directions. Where did I see one of those pieces lately? Hand me the button box. It must be there. I sat up on the floor and shouted, Tofiel, it's coming up to you. It had its choice of the door to the cellar or the hall. It took the hall door for the novelty and set off briskly for so slow a thing, still going every which way in the joints, though, so that it looked like lightning or a scribble from the slap I had just now given its hand. I listened till it almost climbed the stairs from the hall to the only finished bedroom before I got up to do anything, then ran and shouted, Shut the bedroom door, Tofiel, for my sake. Company, he said. Don't make me get up. I'm too warm in bed. So lying forward weakly on the handrail, I pushed myself up the stairs, and in the light, the kitchen had been dark. I had to own I could see nothing. Tofiel, I don't see it. It's with us in the room, though. It's the bones. What bones? The cellar bones out of the grave. That made him throw his bare legs out of bed and sit up by me and take hold of me. I wanted to put out the light and see if I could see it, or else mow the room with our arms at the level of our knees and bring the chalk pile down. I'll tell you what, it's looking for another door to try. The uncommonly deep snow has made him think of his old song, The Wild Colonial Boy. He always used to sing along the tote road, and he's after an open door to get outdoors. Let's trap him with an open door up attic. Tofiel agreed to that. And sure enough, almost the moment he was given an opening, the steps began to climb the attic stairs. I heard them, Tofiel. I don't seem didn't seem to hear them. Quick, I slammed to the door and held the knob. Tofiel, get the nails. I made him nail the door shut and push the headboard of the bed against it. Then we asked was there anything up the attic that we'd ever want again. The attic was less to us than the cellar. If the bones liked the attic, let them have it. Let them stay in the attic when they sometimes come down the stairs at night and stand perplexed behind the door and headbed of the bed, brushing their chalky skull with chalky fingers, with sounds like the dry rattling of a shutter. That's what I that's what I sit up in the dark to say, to no one any more since Tophil died. Let them stay in the attic since they went there. I promised Tophil to be cruel to them, for helping them to be cruel to him. Son, we think they had a grave down in the cellar. Mother, we know they had a grave down in the cellar. Son, we never could find out whose bones they were. Mother, yes, we could, too, son. Tell the truth for once. They were a man's his father killed for me. I mean a man he killed instead of me. The least I could do was to help dig their grave. We were about it one night in the cellar. Son knows the story, but 'twas not for him to tell the truth. Suppose the time had come. Son loads surprised to see me and surprised to see me end a lie we'd kept all these years between ourselves so as to have it ready for outsiders. But tonight I don't care enough to lie. I don't remember why I ever cared. Tofiel, if he were here, I don't believe, could tell you why he ever cared himself. She hadn't found the finger bone she wanted among the buttons poured out in her lap. I verified the name next morning, Tofiel. The rural letterbox said Tofiel Lajway. So, this a summary here, a quick summary of what we just read. A traveler listens to a witch and her son tell the story of a ghost slash skeleton slash spirit slash zombie who is nailed in the attic. The skeleton is the spirit of the witch's former lover, who her former husband, Tofiel, had killed and she had helped to bury. Okay, there's a summary. There's a brief summary of what we had. But what happened? What happened here? The woman in the poem, the witch, cheated on her husband. Her husband was irate and instead of killing her, killed the man with whom she cheated. Then the two of them buried the lover in the cellar. He, one night, clawed his way out, worked his way up the steps, and then the two of them worked together to nail him in the attic. So, what is the one lesson that I have from this? Poetry should be brief. Poetry should be brief. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. No, I'm kidding. Um, there is a lot going on here. And look, one of the things that we sort of one of the ways which we describe poetry is that you say more than you used words. Right? That's one really literature in general, but poetry is sort of the king at saying more than the words that were used. Um, but here's what I really want to do here. Here we are. We noticed briefly the mention of the number 40, and we had 40 yesterday in the discussion of Sonnet 2 by William Shakespeare. Go and watch that if you want the full discussion on the number 40. But the number 40 biblically, and Robert Frost would have been absolutely familiar with the Bible, with the biblically, the number 40 is synonymous with a test of the soul. So our woman here, our witch, our lady, our mother is at the end of 40 years of testing. Here she is admitting to a stranger this terrible thing, this terrible secret of their family. Now, I want to go back to the very beginning of the poem because there is another part that absolutely bears discussion here. Mother can make a common table rear and kick with two legs like an army mule. And when I've done it, what good have I done? Rather than tip a table for you, let me tell you a story. Bada, bada, bada. So, this section here about Mother and her supernatural powers, but Mother says, hey, yeah, I can do that. But should I? There is a question of the responsibility of power. Now, what power? We are led to believe that this is the power of a witch. Okay, fine. But I got something else to talk about here. Remember, this spirit slash zombie slash monster slash skeleton slash ghost clawed its way up from the cellar, boop, 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 was locked in the attic. Okay, what are we talking about there? Cellar to the attic. The earthen portion of our living space is the cellar. The cellar, being the earthen place, underground, is more primal, more earth based. Before people could build tall structures deeper in our ancestry, closer to the animals we really are. Before people could build tall structures, we would dig into the earth and live there, covering the space for shelter. It represents us having little control. The more animalistic nature of us, the less control we have over both nature and our nature. So the cellar represents the more animalistic in us. The cellar represents the animal part of us we cannot control. The attic represents the quote unquote sophisticated part of us, the part we like to call human, the brain part. I mean, just like we are situated, the brain higher from the ground than the feet, the part that moves us around, the mechanical part, the animalistic part, the brain where we think up higher We say that it is the brain, the human part of us, that separates us from the animal kingdom. It is with our brain that we make decisions our animalistic parts would not like. For example, a decision against lust. Our mother, our witch in this poem, made a decision with lust. Now, I think there's an interpretation that can be had that this was a sexual act that was um, not consensual, but she says very clearly, "This night I slapped away the hand, whereas before I did not." So I am prone towards the interpretation that um, this is a more consensual sexual act. As we have evolved, we've grown to build tall structures, right? So that tall structure, the attic part of our home, is more representative of the intellectual portion of us, is more representative of the human part of us, more representative of the decision making faculties of us that should be able to slap away our lustful motivations. So, what are we doing here with this poem? What are we looking at here with this poem? What we're seeing is our witch, our mother, made sweet lovin's to somebody, cheated on her husband, giving in to the primal. In the structure of the relationship, this was ruinous. Her husband killed him, gave in to the primal of his desires to have his wife. Boom, boom, boom. Killed the other man. Together, they buried that other man in the cellar. Now, he broke out of the cellar and worked his way up to the attic. They gave in to both of them. Our witch and Tophiel, her husband, gave in to their animalistic desires and did a bad thing. That thing was buried in their animalistic part, the cellar. Then it crept its way up. Once it got up into the head, into the human part, into the attic, they nailed it in there. That sin of the past worked its way up from the animalistic part into the head, where it now lives. Right? It's rambling around in there. And now her husband is dead. But that ghost lives on in her head. The thing she did lives on in her head. So here's the big question. Here's the big question here. We have this woman who cheated on her husband. Her husband went ballistic and killed the man instead of her. Then they worked together in sin to bury that man. That man's ghost broke out. The thought, the idea of her sin broke out and drove her crazy. The big question here, this young man, well, he's not young, he's 40, doesn't remember any of this. He says that it's a story. It's a story they have. If it's a story they have to him, then it's not his story. If it's his story, then it's a thing that happened and not a story. He says, he makes point to say, I don't know where I was on this night. Is this son in question the son of Tophil, or of the man with whom the witch of Coos cheated? If he belongs to the man with whom the witch of Coos cheated, then her sin is generational. And remember at the beginning, when we talked about what good would it do if I performed this witchcraft, what good would that do? It would just be done. It would just have happened. I would not have necessarily profited from it. If we translate that, the witchcraft involved, to being, for example, an attractive individual, having that gravity, that sexual gravity on other people, should she have performed not witchcraft, but her feminine wares on this other man? She is now, all these years later, questioning whether or not power should be exerted, whether or not she should do these things she can do. And what happened to Tophil? How did he die? We're only told he's not there anymore, right? We're told that's what the mailbox says. What if it is this sin that drove him away? What if this young man grew up to look nothing at all like his father? Well, like Tophil, anyway. What if this young man, this son in the question, in the poem, the young man in question, grew up to remind Tophil of someone he knew once? And every day I see him, I just got to remember this man that I knew once, this man that I ended. There's so much going on in this poem, as there should be when you're using these many words. But I have to admit, writer to writer, someone who considers himself a poet, this makes me jealous. This makes me jealous. This idea that we bury our sin in the primal part of the house only for it to claw its way up to the attic and be nailed in, banging around behind this woman's headboard every time she lays down to sleep. She has to hear him. When you replace that zombie, that skeleton, that spirit, that ghost, when you replace that with an affair, it's beautiful. That is enough to make you jealous if you have ever written a story, if you've ever written a poem, how perfectly that metaphor works. And when it leads the reader directly to questioning everything that we have been otherwise told, we are told this is the sun. We are told it just happens to be 40-ish years later. We are told this woman is a witch. And what about this traveler? What about this individual who is in the poem, but not in the poem? I stayed the night for shelter at a farm behind the mountain with a mother and son, two old believers. They did all the talking. Why is the Witch of Coos tempted to share with this anonymous traveler her story? Is it one of these guilt admissions of guilt late in life when nothing has worked out for you? So here she is on a farm. She doesn't have her husband. That's gone. She doesn't have her lover either. That's gone. And her son that lives with her is 40 years of age and living alone with his mother. It's difficult to think. So he's going to have a whole lot of responsibilities working on a farm. He will have had a whole lot of responsibilities working on a farm his entire life. He's got no time to find a woman of his own. He's got no time to lead that next generation. He's got no time to help raise the people who will inherit the farm from him. So this woman and her sin, a generational sin, laid waste to an entire family and ended, as far as we can tell here, the lineage. But again, we have to ask, whose lineage? Whose lineage? That's all I have for this poetry discussion. Two Witches, the Witch of Coos. Look, there is another witch here at the end of this poem. If I can find it here. The Pauper Witch of Grafton, which I suppose I should do next, which means that the scheduled and empty threat will not be next, but I will put that at the end of National Poetry Month. The Monday after National Poetry Month, I'm going to do In Plaster by Sylvia Plath. So we will have probably 32 days straight of poetry, and then I'll get into other poems after that. If you like what I do here, literature is all I do here: poetry, short stories, novel read-alongs. Consider hitting the subscribe button if you find yourself here by chance but not design. And if you want to help me out, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And I hope to have you back for the next one.